right, yeah! Thank God for fantasy football. I'm Buster Brown and the show is called Redemption Rehab. Today, we're talking about those must-have players you're going to be looking for on the Week 12 waiver wire. Starting with this guy. How about tight end Will Dissly of the Los Angeles Chargers? He's only owned in 15% of fantasy football leagues. We've been talking about him for weeks now. Last week, he had 4 catches for 80 yards and a touchdown on 6 targets. Look, there are guys we've been talking about for weeks, like Will Dissly. We've been talking about Jonnu Smith for weeks. Most of the season, he had 2 touchdowns. We've been telling you about Taysom Hill for half the season. He would have helped you out last week. He had 3 rushing touchdowns for a tight end, not to mention passing and receiving yards. And we've also been telling you about Hunter Henry. That's why you go out and hit the subscribe button, because these guys have been available all year, and we've been preaching about them. Who else should you know about at tight end? How about this guy, Noah Gray of the Kansas City Chiefs? He's owned in less than 2% of fantasy football leagues. Last week against the Buffalo Bills, he had 4 catches and 2 touchdowns. I'll tell you what, go out and pick yourself up some Noah Gray of the Kansas City Chiefs. Put him on your bench. It might help you later on this year. I'll tell you what, we've been talking about these guys all year too. At wide receiver, how about Elijah Moore of the Cleveland Browns? Last week against the New Orleans Saints, he had 6 catches for 66 yards and a touchdown on 8 targets. You got to go out and get yourself some of these guys because it's going to help you win a championship in fantasy football. Who else do we like at wide receiver? How about these guys? How about Curtis Samuel of the Buffalo Bills? We haven't talked about him much all year. He's only owned in 1% of fantasy football leagues. Last week he had 5 catches for 58 yards and a touchdown. How about this guy? A rookie. We haven't talked about him much this year. Devon Valley of Denver. He went out last week, had 4 catches for 66 yards and on 5 targets. This guy is 6'5", 210 plus pounds, and he's starting to get targets out there in Denver. So I think you might want to put him on your bench, but he is a rookie. And I'll tell you what, we really like this guy too. We've talked about him all year. How about Demario Douglas of the New England Patriots? He's only owned in 20% of fantasy football leagues. Last week he caught 5 passes for 59 yards on 7 targets. And his running mate over there in New England at wide receiver, Kendrick Bourne, he had 5 catches for 70 yards on 5 targets. We've talked about Marquise Valdez-Scantling. We told you who else do they have to throw the ball to. Last week, he managed to catch 2 passes for 77 yards and a touchdown. And I'll tell you what, don't forget about Jalen Coker down there in Carolina. Why do we like him? Well, he's a rookie. They don't exactly have a ton of people to throw the ball to. He was on bye last week, so we like him. And if you want some deep sleepers, how about these guys we've been talking about all year? We can't forget about Alec Pierce over there in Indy. He's only owned in 20% of fantasy football leagues. He had 3 catches for 74 yards on 4 targets. And a guy we mentioned in the last couple of weeks, Nick Westbrook-Ikhine for the Tennessee Titans. I'll tell you what, he only had 2 catches, but they were for 117 yards, and he managed to catch another touchdown. I'll tell you what, these are guys I'd at least have on my radar or put on my bench for that playoff run. You never know. I'll tell you what, you need a couple good running backs. Well, it's drying up. I mean, we're in week 12, 13 of the NFL season. These guys aren't hard to find, and we're getting ready for your playoffs. So what do? You got to make sure you get your handcuffs for these players heading into the playoffs in fantasy football, starting with Trey Benson of the Arizona Cardinals. He's the handcuff to Connor. You better pick up, if you can, and it's still available, Tank Bigsby of the Jacksonville Jaguars. He's the handcuff to Travis Etienne. We still like Jalen Wright down there in Miami. We like Gus Edwards as the handcuff to J.K. Dobbins. We like Blake Corum out there in the Los Angeles Rams. You got to get Cam Akers for the handcuff to Aaron Jones. Aaron Jones is banged up, so they're going to be playing Cam Akers a lot. And this guy, Roschon Johnson, he's the handcuff to DeAndre Swift. Seems like every week Roschon Johnson only has a few carries, but he gets a touchdown. DeAndre Swift gets hurt. Look for Roschon Johnson to take over. And the Las Vegas Raiders backfield. I mean, Zamir White's probably the guy you want. Alexander Madison may be banged up. They may look at Dylan Lobby later this year. So I'll tell you what, go out and get yourself someone in that Raiders backfield, and maybe he'll help you win this week or in the playoffs. I'll tell you what, you need yourself a good quarterback. How about one of these guys? We've been talking about Bo Nix all year. He went out and would have got you 4 touchdowns. He's probably not available on your waiver wire. And we like Anthony Richardson, who came in off the bench for Joe Flacco because Flacco got benched. And he had a good week, but both of those guys are owned in over 60% of fantasy football leagues. Guys, we talked about the last couple weeks, which is why you should hit that subscribe button. How about Drake May for the New England Patriots? Last week, he's only owned in 20% of fantasy football leagues. Last week, he was 30 of 40 for 282 yards and 2 touchdowns with a quarterback rating of 100. And we told you, go out and get yourself last week Jameis Winston of the Cleveland Browns. He's only owned in 10% of fantasy football leagues. He was 30 of 46 for almost 400 yards and 2 touchdowns. His quarterback rating was only 67. He throws a lot of interceptions. He's got a tough schedule coming up. But hey, if you're desperate, those are the guys you need to go get. And I'll tell you what, man, if you need a good defense, we've been telling you for the last couple weeks, for the playoff run, go get yourself some Arizona Cardinals. In week 15, they play the New England Patriots. Then they play the Carolina Panthers. In week 17, they play the Los Angeles Rams. If you need somebody for this week, however, we think why not go and get yourself some Washington Commanders against a banged-up Dallas Cowboys? Or maybe you should go out and get yourself some Kansas City Chiefs if they're on your waiver wire. They play the Carolina Panthers. And I'll tell you what, don't forget about the Denver Broncos. They play the Las Vegas Raiders in Las Vegas. Their defense is looking pretty good against a weak Las Vegas Raiders offense. I'll tell you what, that's it for week 12 of the Waiver Wire Report. I'm Buster Brown. The show is Redemption Rehab. Good luck.